Um, Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you, David, for uh, pulling all the hard work behind organizing this retreat. It's, as you all might imagine, really a lot of effort, and it takes a lot of babysitting to give birth to an experience like this, especially since, as people from all the Buddhist communities across the United Kingdom know, there's a lot of reservations that people have about in-person events after the pandemic. We've sort of gotten used to being on Zoom, but we also hate being on Zoom. And we have 18 people here on Zoom, so hi, Zoom people. And it's become a bit difficult actually to attract people to in-person events like this. But I think there's something incredibly powerful in gathering together to practice. And there's also something incredibly powerful about having many people from all over the world join us for this experience. And beyond that, sort of in very much the spirit of Dzogchen, there's also people joining us by means of a recording. So from the time beyond time, they're also with us. And even though these recordings might be a few years old when you're using them, hopefully, and that's our shared aspiration, I believe, they will still be bringing some benefit in the future. And not in any way through any virtue of mine, because as I always try to say when doing any sort of event, whether in person or online, retreat or workshop or anything else, I am here not in the capacity of a capital T teacher of any kind, certainly, and I wouldn't call myself a teacher at all. The only way in which I can possibly imagine doing something like this and sitting here in this lovely room with all these portraits of old white men, the only way I can imagine myself delivering something is if I think that I'm the worst student in class and I was tasked by a strict teacher to deliver a presentation on something. And even though my presentation skills are very limited and my slides are wonky and have all sorts of misprints in them, except this time we have a printout instead of slides, there's still power in the material itself. And because everyone else in class is more advanced, the reminder or the invitation to recall the material, to revisit the material, still has some power, despite the fact that I have no knowledge, no understanding, no practice skills whatsoever. So that's kind of the spirit in which I feel more or less comfortable delivering this. And I do believe that the material itself is incredibly powerful and will speak for itself, because as Lama Alan sometimes says, the four immeasurables, of which loving kindness is a part, is the most universal dharma we could find. It's something that would bring equal benefit to a non-believer, and there's 1 billion non-believers in this world, to a Buddhist practitioner, to a Hindu practitioner, Christian practitioner, and to people who feel affinity with several spiritual lineages at the same time, which is also not at all uncommon. It's just connecting to the beautiful qualities of love, compassion, joy, and equanimity would hopefully bring benefit to all of us. And as we also now know, and I don't want to dwell on that too much, because at least by tomorrow we'll have 2 neuroscientists in the room, and I don't want to embarrass myself by saying nonsense about scientific studies, but we do have solid reasons, we do have valid reasons to say that these practices also have a lot of benefits with regards to our health, to the way our immune system operates, to the way our heart works, and so forth. Genetics changes have been found to be connected to loving kindness practice. It has an effect on our longevity. So basically lots of good stuff. And in addition to that, of course, the psychological element of positive change within our mind. So we're here for 6 days. I hope that everyone will stick with it. And the schedule is relaxed enough where even if you're not particularly passionate about the sessions, which I'm trying to facilitate to the best of my ability, there's lots of breaks. And there's lots of walking meditation sessions where you can just enjoy the beautiful Welsh nature. There's wonderful meals that are waiting for us. The weather is going to be constantly surprising us in all sorts of ways. So It's just a lovely outing. And as one research done by Elissa Eppel has established, and I will be quoting Elissa a lot in this retreat, because she's quite strongly connected to our lineage and works with some of our Dharma friends, including Eve Ekman and others. As one research done by Elissa Eppel established, even people who come to the retreat, to a retreat setting, but actually don't do any meditation and just enjoy the weather, the nice meals, sort of turning off their devices for a little bit, not being on social media too actively, still observe, still experience a lot of health-related benefits that are retained even 1 year after the retreat itself. Even more so for those who actually do meditation. And that's what we're going to try and do together. And this is where there's always a wonderful opportunity to start with meditation. So just as a practical note, for those of you who have been to previous retreats here in Lampeter with Lama Alan, or with Lama Alan in other locations in the United Kingdom, because Lama Alan always has a lot to teach, there's always incredible amount of valuable material to cover, points related to philosophy or a commentary to a specific text that would then be able to inform our practice for years to come. There's a lot of teaching happening. I have nothing to teach, fortunately. We do have some notes that I will try to cover and discuss so that we know that we're firmly rooted in well-tested material. But beyond that, we're just going to be doing a lot of meditation together. And for that reason, each session that we're spending here in the meditation hall would include at least 1 or 2 20-minute meditation sessions, which would leave us with about 20 or 40 minutes of time to discuss the notes, to answer some practice-related questions, and so forth. And although we do have notes, there is a little bit of playfulness with regards to how we go through them, because depending on what questions arise, there's always an opportunity to emphasize this point more or that point more. So even though we could be talking about these notes and loving kindness in general for 3 months, for example, which is one dream of mine. Let's hope one day we can all do 3 months of loving kindness practice together somewhere, maybe in the Pure Lands at least. We would still not go to the very depths of it. We would not still exhaust the richness of this, because loving kindness is one of the forms of love, which is a bigger word. And obviously you can talk about love endlessly and you can practice love almost endlessly for years and decades and still not exhaust the full power of that system of meditation techniques. So we know there's a lot to cover, and yet hopefully by the end of this retreat, we will all feel certain level of trust towards our meditation skills, so that we are leaving this retreat with a feeling that if we wanted to do a similar retreat on our own, just using the same schedule, using the same practices, but really guiding ourselves in that, we would have enough confidence in the practices to be able to do that. Hopefully, we would have enough confidence to continue meditating every day if we feel inspired to do so. And also, hopefully, and that's a larger aspiration of sorts, but we will talk about it later. By the end of this retreat, we will feel a certain level of confidence with regards to our basic goodness, or as Buddhists like to call it, our Buddha nature. So we will hopefully have some glimpses of that, and we will talk about what it means, what is the most easy and appropriate way to access that basic goodness, what do some of the traditional texts used in the Tibetan tradition say about the benefits of connecting to our basic goodness, and how does basic goodness relate to loving kindness. We will have plenty of time to discuss all of that, but hopefully by the end of it, we will feel better about ourselves as human beings and say, oh yeah, I do have some basic goodness. I'm not as hopeless as I originally thought I was. And of course, by contrast, if we felt that we're the best person on the planet, the hottest thing on wheels, by the end of the retreat, we would be much more empathetic, compassionate, and open to others. So it's always a balancing act of neither believing we're the worst, nor clinging to the idea that we're the most important person in the universe. And so somewhere in the middle, we hopefully find a lot of pleasure enjoying this retreat. And after this initial meditation on our aspirations, for ourselves and the world, I would quote some advice with regards to how best to dwell in retreat, some advice from great masters of the 20th century and from the centuries beyond that. And there's always going to be opportunity to ask questions and so forth. So just as a technical note, for those of us here in person, at the end of the hall, there's a table with all sorts of stuff on it. That's where you will find your personal copy of the notes. You don't need them for this session. And that's where there's also a basket and some pieces of paper and some pens. And if you have a practice-related question, feel free to write it down, hopefully in an eligible handwriting, and hopefully as a relatively short question that I would be able to address accordingly, and just put it in the basket. You can fold it and you can put it in the basket there, and David and I and Elizabeth will just occasionally check on that basket and see if there are any questions. Oh yeah, and there's another table right there in the back of the room where you can find additional cushions and blankets, and I think there's a lonely yoga mat there as well. So if you feel like taking any of that, please feel free. We do want everyone to feel very comfortable, and we do want everyone, and that of course includes those who are participating online or by means of a recording, to have a very comfortable meditation nest for this retreat. So the yoga mat that you have currently taken is sort of yours. And please keep using it throughout the retreat. And that might be obvious, but sometimes things still happen. If someone has already taken a yoga mat, don't remove their things and take it over, because it would seem counterintuitive. And I don't think that sort of thing happens that frequently in the United Kingdom, but I have seen things of that nature happen elsewhere, which is kind of uncomfortable, especially in the middle of a silent retreat, where people suddenly discover that their cushions have been moved or someone took them, and it's a big dramatic experience. By contrast, we want the meditation nest to feel nice and comfortable and inspiring and comfy. And for yoga mats, they can also be used to meditate in the supine position on your back. We'll talk about that as well a little bit. But we've also arranged enough chairs for everyone. So if at some point you feel sick of sitting on the yoga mat, or your knees start giving out and your back is not comfortable and so forth, feel free to occupy one of the chairs as well. So you kind of have that dual positioning in the room, because this is not a tantric retreat where we would be sticking to one seat for the entire time. Feel free to move around as long as you're not taking over anyone else's meditation nest. So with that, let's stretch a little bit if that feels appropriate right now, just to make sure your knees are comfortable, your hips are comfortable, and so forth. And I will address the point about silence a tiny bit later when I talk us through the schedule for the retreat. But for now, just finding a comfortable stationary position. You can meditate on your back, you can meditate while sitting up, you can be on a chair, you can use a cushion. Really anything goes as long as you're comfortable and the position is indeed stationary, so that you feel stable in your body. And then once we have found that comfortable position, we allow our awareness to descend into the space of the body, where we start noticing the physical sensations. And especially the tactile sensations associated with the element of earth beneath us. The feeling of our body being in contact with the ground, in the area of our feet, the backside of our legs, our buttocks, maybe our lower back. Breathing naturally and just noticing those sensations, to let our awareness rest with them. If there is any tension in those areas, around our feet, throughout our legs, and so forth, and if we can register that tension and then release it with the exhalation, that's the invitation here. To keep continuously releasing tension with each new out-breath, while still noticing the sensations. Paying attention to our feet and toes. Then coming up to our knees, our thighs, and the area of the pelvic floor. Then the abdominal area. Checking to see if we can soften the muscles there, both in the front, in the abdomen itself, and in the back, in the lower section of our back. And then noticing the sensations in our chest. In the shoulders. Then around the elbow. In our hands and fingers. And then coming back to our shoulders, exploring the neck. Checking on the back of the head, the crown, and then the facial muscles. And then as we expand our awareness to the entirety of the body field, this entire energetic field with all the tactile fluctuations, all the changes, with the process of breathing that we can observe. As we're resting in awareness with regards to all of this, we can also simultaneously be aware of the underlying stillness of the body. There are constant movements related to the breath, the heartbeat, and so forth. But there's also a deeper level of stillness right there that we can notice and connect to. as if we had a wish to release all types of deliberate movement into this stillness with each new exhalation. Not obstructing the breath in any way, allowing the body itself to choose the optimal rhythm, pace, volume, but using the natural exhalation to continuously release all deliberate movement. While still being clearly aware of the body and its stillness. Our speech is similarly resting in a state of natural silence. And our mind, because we have oriented it towards the experience of stillness, is gradually becoming more and more spacious. Temporarily retreating from compulsive ideation related to the past, to the future. Noticing the sensations and the underlying stillness. And then with our body resting in a state of stillness, with our mind being spacious, with our speech being silent, we will undertake a very simple cognitive practice, meaning a contemplation exercise that is related to our aspirations, wishes, desires, goals. Exploring those together. And the theme for this specific exercise is the idea of healing or establishing greater balance. So we can begin this exploration by thinking of our own body and mind, this complex that we associate with ourselves, with our name. And the question is, how can I potentially positively affect my body and my mind by undertaking this retreat? Doing loving kindness practices, concentration practices, practices related to the qualities of tenderness and care. What could be some of the potential benefits for my body and for my mind? desirable benefits or benefits that might logically be inferred from the types of practices that we're going to be doing. Whatever types of healing or balancing we have envisioned, we can then generate the aspiration. May I contribute to my own healing. Or restoration, recharging, rebalancing. With regards to the body, with regards to the mind. And then with that thought, we can breathe life into it, making that aspiration stronger and stronger. May I indeed contribute to my own greater well-being and health, physical and mental. Then we think of the communities to which we belong, professionally, personally, in terms of our identities, in terms of where we live. Human communities, communities that include other species. We can think of these networks that we are a part of and then think, how could I contribute to the healing of these communities through strengthening my own qualities of loving kindness, mindfulness, introspection, compassion, joy? And explore that question for a moment. How can I contribute to the healing of these communities? And then turning that general idea or that vision, or that understanding into a wish. May I contribute to the healing, a rebalancing of all the communities that I am a part of. And letting that wish, that aspiration grow stronger and stronger in our heart, strengthening it with each new exhalation, as if breathing life into it. And then finally thinking about the entirety of humans on this planet and other beings as well, thinking of this world in general, and once again asking ourselves, how could we, through the qualities of loving kindness and so forth, contribute to the healing of the world? How could the world be changed if we all together, as a group of about 40 people, offline and online, we're able to truly master loving kindness and embody it in profound ways. And then generating the wish. May I contribute to the healing of the world. And strengthening it with each exhalation. Planting that powerful seed. And then we release the wish, release the aspiration, simply resting in clear awareness without a particular reference point for a moment. And we then bring our awareness back to the body to ground ourselves there, noticing the sensations, noticing the process of breathing. And then introducing a tiny bit of movement to the body by moving our fingers, maybe rocking back and forth a little bit, stretching if we feel inspired to do so. And then we gradually transition back into our shared space. Thank you. We will be doing a lot of these kinds of practices related to our aspirations, desires, wishes, goals, because in general, loving kindness belongs to the family of practices related to our conation, or our ability to desire, to wish, to aspire. It's a specific aspect of our psyche, the least researched, or one of the least researched, but fortunately extremely well known within the Buddhist tradition of contemplative practice, and that's where all of these meditations are coming from. There are hundreds and thousands of practices related to generating specific types of aspiration and then allowing them to fully suffuse our being. And while loving kindness is one of the more straightforward ways of doing that, a general way of generating benevolence, we would sometimes also be using practices in which we focus on one specific facet of that. And for example, now we've focused on this idea of healing the world, of bringing something that would contribute to the healing of the world, which is an idea that I enjoy quite a lot, as not in any way contradicting the powerful idea of spiritual warriorship and so forth, but a different take on the same theme, let's say, because while the world does indeed perhaps need people who would be incredibly courageous in transforming it in terms of bringing beautiful qualities of wisdom and compassion to all the aspects of our existence, describing those people as spiritual warriors, I think, is not the only metaphor or idea that we can use. And I would very much hope that our retreat would indeed be a process of rebalancing everything that we can rebalance with regards to our body, with regards to our mind, with regards to the connection between the two. Hopefully, the environment itself will have a positive effect on us as well. And let's just hope we will all leave this retreat more calm and peaceful than we entered it. One of my teachers used to say that a good retreat is a retreat where no one died. That's true. It's also, in a way, good to die in retreat from a Buddhist point of view, because that's where your mind is attuned to compassion and wisdom. So what's the best environment to die in? But please don't die. I'll try not to as well. And outside of that, let's just hope to live this retreat with fun memories and lots of positive feelings about it. That's the aspiration there as well. But yes, indeed, if we can contribute to the healing of the world, let's do that as well. And these practices will definitely be of help. So I will also voice some technical notes right now. One of them is related to our schedule. So I will just talk you through the schedule, even though you don't have a printed out version on your hands right now. The logic is fairly simple. So first of all, on the issue of silence, we think, well, at least I think, and then I'm projecting and extrapolating onto David and Elizabeth and others, that the general recommendation that Lama Allen always used to give for these retreats is very, very meaningful, and that is, by default, let's assume that most of us want to be in relative silence. So we just want to enjoy the peace and quiet on the grounds, and especially during meal times. Let's keep the cafeteria fully silent, except for when you have to communicate with the staff, because they will be asking, what do you want? And you'll need to tell them, or you can point, that's always an option to do that. But no one will judge you if you do say that you want this or that, so that's not a problem. But once you're sitting and eating, let's keep that space quiet for better digestion, let's put it that way. However, outside of that, if you're here with a spiritual friend or a companion, or you need to talk to one of us, and as Lama always says, if it's a meaningful conversation that you need to have, absolutely feel free to just walk away a little bit where you won't be disturbing others, and have that conversation if that's what's most meaningful. But beyond that, yes, just trying to be courteous with regards to others, not disturbing them, not being too chatty, and allowing our speech to kind of rest in this natural state of silence is a generally good idea. Within the old Kadam tradition, they had this practice of imagining that every time our speech energy wants to manifest, and that usually means us saying something nonsensical, we can imagine it dissolving back into the seed letter ah in our throat. So kind of the seed of our speech energy is there. And every time we notice the impulse to speak, we can kind of withdraw it back, allow it to dissolve there, and just rest there in this potential state as opposed to its activated state. So if it helps you, it's great. We're just trying to maintain sort of silence. There's always going to be moments when you do hear someone else in the group speaking, inevitably so, either to the staff members or to each other, what to do. Then it's just an invitation to project more loving kindness, right? Because we are in a loving kindness retreat. And similarly, if you are the one speaking, yeah, you're inviting loving kindness from others. So if they're glaring at you and throwing nasty looks, it's just their way of showing loving kindness towards you. Just enjoy that. Similarly, with regards to the boundaries of the retreat. So just the introductory note, in modern colloquial Tibetan, the term for being in retreat, tsamla depa, literally means being within a boundary, being within a boundary of some sort. And then the explanation of that is, well, what kind of boundary do we mean? Because in some retreats, there would be an actual physical boundary delineated in the beginning of a retreat, or sometimes drawn on the ground, and you would have a special ritual accompanying that to seal off all the obstructive forces and so forth. So it's like a whole energetic container with a very clear boundary to it. And that's primarily related to Vajrayana-style tantric retreats where energy plays a very important role, so it needs to be sealed off in a way. This is not the kind of retreat we're doing here. We're doing more of a meditation retreat on the theme of loving kindness. So there's no point in me saying, well, if you step off the grounds of the university. You've broken your retreat, and it's the end of the world. And whatever, you know, we're all adults. And if you want to take a longer walk during one session and venture outside of the campus grounds somewhere to the neighboring farm, and then you're walking back, or you do need to go to Co-op to buy cookies for some reason because you're having this very strange craving for cookies all of a sudden, that's not a problem. Let's just be relaxed about all of it. So we're not doing that kind of boundary, but we're just thinking, okay, we're doing a retreat within the territory of the town of Lampeter. That's good enough. So, but the actual meaning of those boundaries is not necessarily physical boundaries, even though that is a thing. One of our precious teachers, the late Lama Zopa Rinpoche, says, and I quote, "The essential meaning of retreat is retreat from non-virtuous actions of body, speech, and mind. Abstaining from negative karmas that harm others is the fundamental tantric practice." So the first type of retreat that we're doing is stepping away from activities that would be harmful for others, and by extension for ourselves. So I'm not going to say anything moralistic, but and this is just an invitation for us to think throughout the retreat, and even in this moment, what are some of the actions that I personally can step away from for the duration of these 6 days that might be somewhat harmful to me or to others? And I would imagine none of us would be going hunting over these 6 days, I don't know, or making weapons or whatever else that we might be doing. But in terms of harming ourselves, we can think, well, what are some of the habits of mine related to harming myself that I can step away from? For example, something that might be harmful for my attention skills. How do I want to manage my attention with regards to email, social media, directing my attention somewhere where it would be harmed or damaged, and so forth. Just considering those points and saying, okay, I can indeed step away from these types of actions for a little while. And that can also be connected to our diet. It could be related to the way we treat each other here, once again, with a gentle smile and a friendly glare, not a hostile one. So just those sorts of things. And that's the first level there. And then beyond that, that's another quote from two wonderful Nyingma masters, teachers of mine, Khenchen Palden Sherab and his brother Khenpo Tsewang Dongyal. Some people know them as the Khenpo brothers. They teach in the United States. The purpose of retreat practice is to dedicate all activity to the practice of the Dharma. During retreats, the practitioners try to refrain from following their regular thoughts. So it's not simply stepping away from specific types of activity. The invitation is to step away from habitual types of thinking and transform our thinking into something new. So to establish new patterns of thinking. For example, with loving kindness, where the first stage is to project powerful loving kindness towards ourselves, the invitation is to step away from negative types of self-perception, no longer seeing ourselves as being these low quality, poor quality beings, or kind of desperate and needy and useless and worse than everyone else, and the worst, probably the only people on the planet who don't have good nature. That's kind of how sometimes through negative conditioning and negative imprints we might perceive ourselves. So catching ourselves doing that and stepping away from that, that's a retreat. We're retreating from that into something else, a new type of thinking. But it can also mean retreating from our normal plan building activities. And that's where the Khenpo brothers tell the story of a great and very strange behaved yogi called Drukpa Kunle, who was known as one of those crazy wisdom yogis, quite famous in Tibet for his wild activities. So that at one point in his very rich spiritual career, Drukpa Kunle agreed to enter a 3-year retreat with his brother. And his brother was an abbot of a monastery, so a very learned person himself, and quite excited to practice together with Drukpa Kunle, who was a yogi. So they went into 2 retreat huts right next to each other. And Drukpa Kunle said, well, but there's one condition. If we enter this retreat, I will only stay in retreat as long as you're in retreat. So if you leave retreat, I'm leaving as well. Sounds fair. said the brother. And so they entered the retreat and they started doing their practices. And on the first day of the retreat, the brother who was the abbot started thinking about the new types of construction that he wants to do in the monastery, and taking care of the daily business and taking care of his monks and so forth. And soon enough, Drukpa Kunle was knocking on his door and saying, "You broke the retreat, I'm leaving, bye." And the abbot said, "What are you talking about? I'm in my retreat hut. I haven't left, I haven't gone anywhere." And Drukpa Kunle, because he was a clairvoyant yogi, said, "Well, you were thinking about your plans. You were making plans with regards to the monastery. Your mind was in mundane business. This is not a retreat. Bye." And he left. So I don't know how much of a lesson that was to the abbot, and whether that's more of a proverbial story than an actual one, but that's a good illustration for us. So if at any point during the retreat you do start getting crazy business ideas, about opening that new bakery or starting that startup or whatever, just note it down and let it be for a while. Don't come back to it until the end of the retreat, but focus more on practice of loving kindness and so forth. This is a wonderful opportunity for all of us to rest a little bit in the nature of the mind, in loving kindness, in the beautiful environment that we have. And yes, if something comes up, we just take a mental note or we write it down, and we'll come back to it later. It will just ripen over this time. It will mature. We'll be able to come back to all of it. So no need to make those phone calls right away, suggesting those new types of business activity to all the friends and colleagues. And so the idea then is that these boundaries for the retreat establish a container. That's the language that is now frequently used in the United States when people are talking about retreats. Oh, the container was maintained very well, meaning everyone was at the session on time, which they're not right now. Some people are missing. We lost them somewhere on the grounds. Everyone was in time. People were relatively good at maintaining silence, those sorts of things. That's a well-maintained container, people say, which is fair. And then beyond that, there's also this mental aspect to it, which we're also working on individually. And simply sticking with a retreat is a good way to maintain the container for each other. So always, at any retreat, including loving kindness retreats, which are probably the nicest kind of retreat to do, there's always someone struggling a tiny bit unexpectedly and saying, "Oh no, I can't go to the session, or there's too much, or I just gotta leave, or there's too much happening, or I didn't expect this reaction for myself, but I am facing some inner struggles." There's always something of that nature. And just the invitation is to still stick with the practice, to still continue, to not give up, to know at the end of this retreat, you will feel much better if you continue and complete it, and everyone will feel much better. And the practice is gentle enough where it is manageable as opposed to some other types of retreats. So let's just try to get to the end of it together as well. And that will be a well-maintained container. And then what's the idea with the container itself? One comparison that I like from another teacher is that this is an alchemical container. We put ourselves into that container for some alchemy to happen, meaning some transformation to occur. And actually, in the Tibetan tradition, it's quite strongly emphasized that although daily meditation practice does transform our mind quite powerfully, and at least allows us to maintain a certain level of meditation achievements, it is specifically retreat practice that brings the most powerful transformation. And in my experience, whenever I did 6-day retreat, 7-day retreat, 3-month retreat, longer retreats, those were the ones that brought about a stronger shift in my perception of myself and my perception of the world, stronger shift than just daily practice, where there's more of a cumulative effect that is not necessarily as obvious at the end of it. So that's the alchemical process that we can try and attain by sticking with it. So how to do the retreat properly? There's lots of advice on that, and on many cases, if you read some of the traditional texts on that, some of them are called Mountain Dharma Ritu, which is a genre of text in the Tibetan tradition written by usually great yogis Dujum Rinpoche, Karma Chagme Rinpoche, and many others. And usually it's a bit daunting, or very daunting, because these masters, writing from the incredible high altitude of their experience, are saying things like, well, if your mind has any remnant of the 8 worldly concerns, well, it's completely useless, your practice, and then make sure you abandon all worldly concerns and just throw yourself into the Dharma and don't let your mind ever get distracted and just rest in the nature of blah, 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 blah. And it's very meaningful advice, but looking at it from where we are right now as complete beginners, and I'm talking about myself here, when I look at that from my position as a complete beginner, I'm mostly intimidated. It's like, oof, that's intense, Does that mean my practice is really useless? No, not at all. We're starting at this level where we're just going to go very, very gently. We're going to walk into it with an attitude of joy. And that's why there's another quote from the Kenpa brothers that I like. They're commenting on one of those instruction texts. Relax joyfully in a solitary place. That's the quote. So relax joyfully in a solitary place means that while on retreat, it is always important to be relaxed. Your mind, your body, and your speech must be relaxed, peaceful, and quiet. That sounds lovely, doesn't it? So quiet, that's more or less obvious. So we'll try to be quiet to the best of our ability. Peaceful, okay, we'll do lots of practices for establishing a greater degree of relaxation and tranquility. And also just having a relaxed attitude. We're not expecting to get enlightened by the end of this retreat. And if someone does get enlightened, it would be so wonderful. Please leave a review. But if not, no big deal. That was not the expectation, right? We just had a lovely time in Wales, and we learned some Welsh words while we were here. And we had wonderful food, and we looked at the beautiful hills, and we were feeling more relaxed and more peaceful. So, okay, being very, very humble about our expectations. Then a quote from Lama Alan from his wonderful book on the Four Immeasurables. If you've never read it, after the retreat, definitely recommend it. It's his teachings on loving kindness and the companion states, and it was compiled from the talks that he gave during a retreat with a small group of friends in, I think, 1992. So kind of similar to what we're doing here. We're just a group of friends, came together, we're going to have some chips and coffee and meditate a little bit together. But Lama Alan in those teachings is recalling his first shamatha retreat, which he did in Dharamsala under the personal guidance of His Holiness. And this is what he's saying. On my first shamatha retreat, I found many wrong ways to practice. And that was being too hard on himself. And that was one of them. I starved myself for pleasure, living in a hut that was saturated with bedbugs, fleas, and rats, with a totally uninteresting diet and meeting with nobody. So we're already advantaged because we have no bedbugs, fleas, or rats. And if you do have bedbugs, tell David, but I think you're not gonna. We have a very interesting diet, and we are meeting each other, and we're going to be smiling and waving. Feel free to do that. For a while, I was deriving no pleasure at all from my practice. I was pile driving with such intensity, determination, and discipline that there was no space for any happiness to squeak through. There was not much benefit in this very strong asceticism. It would have been much more helpful to create some space. Even a novel or some candy bars would have helped. So I hope you have candy bars or a novel. And if not, there's a co-op down the road. But in general, we're being offered dessert and all sorts of things at the canteen. So that might help. And then finally, a gentle approach works better. It doesn't need to be severe or tyrannical. So we'll just try not to be severe with ourselves. And that's the basic idea. Well, I don't need to dwell more on this point, but I do want to mention it and bring it up because I know that in many of the previous retreats which I facilitated and the retreats that I did myself, and from what I've learned from other people who have done long-term retreats or short-term retreats, there's always this moment where we want to push ourselves a little bit harder. So that's when we're relaxed. But if you are on the other side of being too relaxed, meaning you just don't come to the sessions at all, well, that's another thing to consider. What's the point then, right? So it would be hopefully nice to do some meditation together and to come to all of the sessions. But beyond that, and that's where the schedule comes in. So in our schedule, the first thing on the list is between 6 a.m. and 7:30, there's an optional personal practice. So that means if you are a morning person, and I'm not one of those, maybe you are like Lama Allen or His Holiness and you get up at 3 a.m. and you go into your practice. So that would be a wonderful opportunity to practice. And I believe this room will be open 24/7. So if you don't want to meditate in your room, feel free to come in here, meditate, practice, or meditate outside if the weather is nice, or meditate in your room. So that's just an invitation for people who also have daily commitments, recitations, mantras that you need to recite, or prayers or practices. That's not uncommon in the Tibetan tradition. So that would be a logical window to stick all of that in. Then between 7:30 and 9 a.m. is breakfast, if you do eat breakfast. So we're having breakfast, and then between 9 and 10 a.m. we will come here and practice together. We will do 1 or 2 meditation sessions. There will be some explanations, questions and answers, all of that. And then between 10 a.m. and 10:45, we have the first of these so-called walking meditation or somatic practices. So what it means that we will not be all in this room. If the weather is nice, we can go out. If the weather is nasty, sometimes people still go out, and sometimes people prefer to practice here or in their own room. And you have all these options, it's your call. What it means is that before these walking meditation sessions, I will give some suggestions about what we might practice. And as the retreat goes on, you will have more and more and more options for these walking meditations, because there are many, many techniques that could be used. And then you can spend your time doing those meditations, or you can take a nap. That's what your body needs, strictly speaking, because we are in an environment with a lot of oxygen, more oxygen than London, for example. And some people feel very sleepy in the first few days because they're over-oxygenated. That happens to me all the time. So totally valid. If you need that nap, take that nap. That is practice of loving kindness for yourselves. But beyond that, you will have many options to play around with during those. Then between 10:45 and 11:30, there's a break. So you can also take a nap there. Then 11:30 to 12:30 is another practice session here. So we'll come together, meditate, discuss. 12:30 to 2 p.m. is lunch. Then 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. is another session here with all of us. 3 to 3:45 is one of those walking meditations. And for people on Zoom, we did mention this in the email, but these walking meditations are obviously not on Zoom because we're all going to be in different locations doing them. So I don't know how we could follow each person with a camera and just have that immersion experience. No, it will be an invitation for all of us to practice on our own. Then 3:45 to 4:30 tea break, 4:30 to 5:30 practice session. And it says here in the schedule, visual method. So what that means is that in that session, we will be playing more with techniques that involve generating loving kindness by using visual imagery, visualizations, and so forth. But I will talk about that in detail and offer some alternatives to those who are not comfortable with those sorts of practices. Then 5:30 to 6:30 is break for personal practice. See how flexible we are, which means you can stay here and meditate for an hour. You can meditate in your room. You can do more walking meditation. You can read a book. That's an invitation to be mature in how we use our time. That's our choice. Then 6:30 to 8 is dinner, but I believe that the cafe is only expecting us between 6:30 and 7:30. And those last 30 minutes are just for us to stretch and walk around. So for dinner, it's best to show up early, get the food, and then relax. And then finally, between 8 and 9 is our last practice session for the day. And then it's nighttime. So you're free to continue practicing if you're an owl, or go to bed, or whatever else. Probably not clubbing, but once again, there are options on what we can do. So that's just the basic idea about the schedule. If you have any questions related to that, feel free to ask. or you can write your question down. I don't think there's anything counterintuitive here, but that's a basic idea. So some more technical notes related to the retreat in general. As I've mentioned, all of the practices, or 98% of the practices that we're going to be doing together, can be done in the supine position, lying flat on your back on the yoga mat. When Lama Allen offers that option, he always includes a conditional clause there, and that is, by going into the supine position, you give your consent for one of us to gently touch your wrist if you start snoring. So if your neighbor starts snoring, or if someone in the room starts snoring loudly, either your nearest neighbor or David or Manu, well, probably not me because it's going to be a lot of movement, but one of us can just gently wake you up so the snoring is not too invasive for everyone else. That just comes with the territory. So if you know you snore every time, opt for the upright position, perhaps. But this is also a learning curve. It is natural when we are underslept to be falling asleep for us to start snoring. And over time, as our body regains that restful energy, that might start happening less. And also we're better able to maintain clarity of awareness. But if you feel embarrassed about potentially snoring, in our common sessions, you can practice in the upright position, and in the sessions for personal practice, you can be on your back meditating. And also there's always an invitation to do a tiny bit of meditation before sleep on your bed in your room, just to seal the day with that. So that's another idea. Of course, if you're meditating at home and you're on Zoom, snore away. That feels comfortable. There's no one you would disturb. Maybe apart from your partners, pets, children, and so forth. But at least they'll be happy that you're finally getting some rest. That's also nice. And another cultural note is that in the Tibetan cultural tradition, we usually are invited to not point our feet towards the Buddha or sort of the shrine. So culturally, you would be invited to, when you're lying down, to have your head towards this side of the room and your feet away from this side of the room. I'm not going to be saying, oh, how dare you, you're just like, why are you pointing? Like, I don't care either way. I'm just voicing that's part of the cultural tradition. It's up to us to decide what we want to do with it. No one's going to be particularly bothered. I would invite all of us to wear clean socks, though. So that's a larger concern. And that's, I think, a cross-cultural tradition to wear clean clothes and clean socks and so forth. Another thing related to that is that the printouts, and you're welcome to read through them or wait until we reach specific points in them, because there's quite a lot of quotes and ideas there, and we will explain and discuss all of them. One thing about them is that they're considered to be Dharma in a physical form. So the teachings of the Buddha, transformative teachings of the Buddha, and some of these printouts are actually quotes from the Buddha himself or some of the great contemplative masters of the past. So once again, in the Tibetan cultural tradition, it would be deemed disrespectful to just put them on the ground or on the seat, or to step over them, and all these sorts of things. So you would, for example, put them on your, if you have them here with you, you would put them on your bag, or you would wrap your jacket and put them on your jacket or something like that. So just not putting them on the ground. And if you're on the chairs, for example, next to these lovely black radiators, you could put them on the radiator. There's lots of options of that nature. But once again, it's not like anyone's gonna yell at you if you put it on the ground. It's just a thing to consider. And a thing to play around with and think, oh, well, there is value in these notes potentially, so that's what I'm going to do with them. But I'm not even going to look as to who places what where. So that's another observation on the way of dealing with the room. And the one final note on that is, once again, to respect other people's meditation nests, just to not steal cushions and so forth, because we don't want, because we will be getting more and more sensitive as we go deeper into the retreat. We will be becoming more vulnerable because we're relaxing into it, and we feel safe, ideally, hopefully. And when we feel most vulnerable, to have someone steal our beloved cushion might be a bit of a shock to our system. So we don't want that. So let's not do that. And beyond that, another thing that I wanted to just briefly mention tonight with regards to retreats. This is sort of a cultural commentary, but it's important because I think quite naturally in the room we have an ordained monastic. And so we have people who are deeply embedded, deeply invested in the Tibetan contemplative tradition and know a lot about it. And then we have people who are coming more from the mindfulness side of things, or contemplative practices for business efficiency side of things. And maybe we have people who are completely new to retreats in general, or I thought I'd start meditating by coming here. So we have very different backgrounds when it comes to all of this. And obviously, I do have some background when it comes to corporate efficiency and things like that, but most of my training has been in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. So that's what I know best. And in particular, there are different ways of looking at that tradition. Some people are more linguistic in their approach. That includes Lama Alan, and some are more historians of the Dharma. So that's my forte. I'm very interested in the history of the Dharma. That's why I love stories about great masters and so forth. And I want them to be preserved and multiplied in terms of our research. So I like talking about the history and the anthropology of the Dharma, because through that we can understand very powerful things about the practice itself. So when you would visit truly elaborate retreat in the Tibetan tradition, the most elaborate of retreats are called drupchens, or the great accomplishment ceremonies. These are usually 7 or 10-day retreats that are very intense in nature, and they're called great accomplishment ceremonies because the practice goes on 24 hours a day. There are groups taking turns and reciting the practice 24/7. So there's never a break in the practice. And collectively, the group together accumulates very, very powerful psychic energy, you could say, that truly changes the psyche of each participant. And at the end of it, there's a powerful ceremony for releasing it all or absorbing it all. And everyone walks away somewhat changed to a certain degree. And it's even said that these drupchens can be equal in their transformative power to a 3-year or a 7-year solitary retreat, just because there's so much energy in collective practice when done to that degree. So when one would be planning an occasion like that, first you would choose a theme that speaks to you, right? You would be thinking, well, I want to do a retreat. So what kind of retreat do I want to do? So in our case, we've settled on the theme of loving kindness. One reason is that loving kindness is easy to practice. It's available to everyone. It's equally beneficial. It's the universal Dharma, as Lama Alan calls it. And another reason is that that's what I know best. So if you think I don't know much about loving kindness, wait until you see me talk about other things. It would be even worse. But with regards to loving kindness, at least I've accumulated some quotes, so it shouldn't be completely horrible. But even if we're not particularly passionate about loving kindness personally, here's an invitation. We can pretend for 6 days that we are passionate loving kindness yogis and yoginis. So they are actually people not just in the Tibetan tradition, but in other traditions of Buddhism and in Christianity, and I believe in other lineages as well. There are people who specialize on the practice of loving kindness or love. In the Christian tradition, it's quite a famous story. One time when His Holiness the Dalai Lama visited Montserrat, which is this very important Christian pilgrimage site in Catalonia in Spain, and it was an important cultural center for Catalonian independence during the Franco years, and it's a powerful monastic site of practice and a popular tourist destination as well. When he was there, he met a cave yogi, a Christian cave yogi called Father Basil, who spent many years in solitary retreat. And when the Dalai Lama was having a conversation with him, Father Basil said that his main practice was meditation on love. So he was probably doing it in a slightly different way, but love is love. So there are practitioners of that nature across multiple traditions, and similarly in Buddhism as well, all the way back to the Buddha. you would have specific individuals that were known for having loving kindness as their main practice. So that was their forte. So because this retreat is on loving kindness, for us to get the most benefit of it, we kind of need to pretend that that's what we're most passionate about. And that would help us maintain the flow of practice throughout the 6 days. And if at the end of the retreat, we go back to our other practices, or we switch to another practices and we continue searching, absolutely fine. The skills that we have developed will already be with us. But for the duration of these 6 days, let's pretend that we are loving kindness yogis. We're super passionate specifically about loving kindness, and we're looking in all sorts of ways. We're looking at all these different ways to strengthen it, to make it especially potent. And that's what I'll try to mention in bringing up some of the different ideas and suggestions from across the Tibetan contemplative tradition. Then once we have chosen a theme or specific practice for that retreat, we would be invited to choose a period that would be auspicious, and that's where Tibetans would open their Tibetan calendar apps. There's a few these days. And then they would look at like, what day is most auspicious to begin a retreat? What day is most auspicious to conclude the retreat? So sometimes you would have a day that is not particularly auspicious in terms of just the astrology in general, but it is also an anniversary of some great practitioner of the past. And because of that, it is automatically auspicious. So that's our case. Today is the anniversary of a great practitioner, a great spiritual master that died in 1950 and was one of the Sakya throne holders. He was the 40th Sakya Trizin, or head of the Sakya tradition within Tibetan Buddhism. His name was Kyabgon Ngalang Tutop Wangchuk, and he was a great yogi, a lineage holder who transmitted practices to the next generation. But amongst other things, he was a miracle worker. So there's quite a lot of stories about the miracles that he performed that were witnessed by the generation of masters preceding our generation. And amongst other things, I know some people in the audience like Shambhala stories. So amongst other things, this is a line from his biography. When his noble father, meaning the father of this master, passed away, passed into final nirvana, the master himself was nowhere to be found, causing great concern. So his father died, no one can find him. He's the next throne holder of the tradition. Where is he? Disappeared for 3 days. Suddenly, after 3 days, he appeared out of nowhere. He explained that he had escorted his noble father to the Pure Land of Shambhala and brought back a wondrous flower that no one had ever seen before to prove it. So 2 times, at least in recent Tibetan history, there were lamas who were said to go to Shambhala for a little while, hang out there, come back and bring something to prove it. So this master brought a flower, and the father of the previous Serkung Rinpoche brought some Shambhala fruit, which I can't even imagine what it would look like, but no one in Tibet had ever seen anything like that. So if you are into interdimensional travel, like Marvel movies, there's your guy. He went to Shambhala and came back with some flowers. That's pretty inspiring. So we're starting our retreat on his anniversary. How auspicious. Then we would be invited to choose a location, which we did. It was Lampeter University. And there's a natural beauty to how the elements are organized and so forth. These are important factors. But it's also easy to procure food. That would be explained as one of the prerequisites. Wales is lovely in all sorts of ways. I'm wearing Welsh colors, so white, red, and green. And once again, just on an anthropological note, the colors, I mentioned this to Elizabeth earlier, the colors of the Welsh flag correspond to the corresponding colors in the Tibetan mandala system. So green is north, white is center, and red is west. So we are in the northwest, central northwest sort of the British Isles. So perfect. And I dressed for the occasion. And then after we have established the boundaries for the retreat, we would start the actual practice by first connecting to the lineages that brought us all these teachings. We will do that tomorrow morning by doing some meditations that help us connect to our own lineages of inspiration of different kind. That's related to Ecodharma actually, but also to Dharma in general. What masters, what practitioners, yoginis, yogis, what texts, what translators brought all of this wealth of knowledge to us and allowed us to practice with all of it. That's an important thing to find inspiration, but it's also an important step to take to avoid colonialism in how we treat all of this material. Because certainly Lobsang Tenpa did not come up with any of this, I'm telling you. I made the printouts, but beyond that, this is all coming from precious, precious lineage. And Lama Alan is extremely differential when it comes to his own teachers and the preciousness of this tradition. Same, of course, with all of the other lamas that we might have a connection to. So we will do that exploration. But beyond that, for these practices, as we will see in the notes, there's a lot of power in also connecting to the inspiring qualities we might have inherited through our family lineage. And there's also benefit in connecting to the land lineage, or sort of everyone who has lived here before, everyone who's living here now, sort of the land that we're temporarily using as our retreat place. So we'll meditate on all of that in the morning first thing. And then after that, we're just invited to do actual retreat sessions and retreat breaks. So in the breaks, we will be invited to still be doing something meaningful, thinking about loving kindness, writing notes to ourselves about that, doing walking meditation, looking around, enjoying beautiful natural views, absorbing the elemental energies and so forth. We'll talk about all of that. And actual meditation sessions is what we do here together. So a quote on that: whenever and however you meditate, be joyful. That's once again from the Kenpo brothers. Whenever and however you meditate, be joyful. That will be a note when we do actual meditation sessions. Do not neglect the skillful means practices. At the beginning of every meditation session and even during the practice, invoke good thoughts. Again, do not be forceful, so be relaxed, but also do not back away, so don't leave prematurely, and lose your courage, commitment, and confidence. And then they're saying that in between sessions where it's good to still be doing something meaningful. So reading something meaningful, doing a tiny bit of informal practice, walking while maintaining thoughts of loving kindness, simply looking at people while projecting loving kindness towards them. There's all sorts of ways to do that. And then at the end of it, if we do it this way, we will have basically accumulated many hours of practicing together here formally, but also all the informal practice that is like a thread running through the entirety of the retreat. And that thread is called loving kindness. And then because that thread grows in strength, the more we use it, the more we practice with it, at the end of it, we're walking away with this powerful feeling, oh, I do have this much stronger loving kindness now, and it can indeed contribute to the healing of the world. So that's the invitation there. I think that's enough for just the introductory ideas with regards to what is retreat, why are we doing this, how we're doing it, what is the schedule, and so forth, how whether to wear clean socks and all that. So if you have any questions related to any of this, please feel free to ask now. Otherwise, we can enjoy a beautiful evening. If you do want to chat a little bit tonight, no problem. But once again, I'll just step away from the building so that people don't then complain that they could hear you talking through their window all night long. And then after that, the breakfast will already be kind of silent, apart from us talking to the staff to tell them about the kind of oatmeal that we want. Yeah, and then we'll continue practicing from 9 a.m. Yeah.
And will you have a way of answering the question, or if you stop it, will you just leave them in, because you mentioned the answer in the back?
Yeah, I'll try to, so I'll just repeat for the Zoom people. So the question is whether there will be a particular way of answering the questions or whether I will weave them in. Usually I try to weave them in because sometimes a particular question arises that is related to the next point in the notes. So then there's no need to wait until a specific session. And sometimes the question is sort of urgent and it's best for everyone to hear the answer straight away. So I usually try to weave them in. And so that allows us for us to sometimes deal with the questions, sometimes go back to the notes. And that way it's more or less organic. It's also an invitation for people to not skip sessions, because if they ask a question and they skip a session, well, what to do, you know? So yeah. And once again, for submitting the questions online, please email them to Venerable Tenzin, and I'm just going to drop the address there. And in person, that's where the basket is for. And for both online and offline, it's good to just keep them brief and succinct. Just ideally, it's one sentence with a question mark at the end. That's what a question is. And one note on that, sometimes people come with very earnest questions about specific situations in their life. Some of my teachers get a lot of those. It's like my brother-in-law and then his wife, and it's a long story. And I'm simply not qualified to provide therapeutic advice. And with regards to the Dharma side of things, the Dharma does not give ready-made answers, as in, this is what you should do when you're having this type of trouble with your brother-in-law. It's rather providing us with recipes for strengthening wisdom and compassion, and then we use those wisdom and compassion to make our own adult decisions. So while I am always trying to be empathetic and understanding with those questions, I simply have not much to offer in terms of actual advice. And also, that might be a liability in terms of, if I give bad advice, he might sue me. So I'm not doing that. But practice-related questions are really great. And if you have general questions about meditation, Buddhism as well, we'll try to deal with them as well. But primarily, the ones that I'll try to prioritize will be the ones on the practices that we're doing as we're doing them. So that's pretty much it. If you have anything else to ask, add, offer. And it's always best to not have any questions. Well, there's different opinions on that, because apparently when lamas were just coming to the West, they were really impressed with how inquisitive the Westerners were, because there's not that many questions asked in traditional Asian spaces of learning, at least amongst the lay people. The monastics are encouraged to be inquisitive because they're doing debate, but lay people usually are interested in how to do a specific practice and how would it help my daily life. But in the West, everyone was super inquisitive with all sorts of tricky questions. But it's gradually changing now, they say, because some of the lamas that I translated for are saying that now the young Nepali people are asking lots of questions, whereas the Americans have become more or less open to anything and they're not asking many questions anymore. So who knows? Yeah.
I think I should do some breathing physio exercises every day, and I don't really have room in my room to do so. Am I welcome to do this here, or is this a meditation only?
Yeah, so the question, I'm just repeating for the Zoom people. The question is if we have to do some yoga or breathing exercises and there's not much room in our room, is it okay to do it here? Yeah, I would say this is just my opinion. This is not a formal shrine room. We're temporarily transformed it into a practice room. So because in some, for example, monasteries, they say, oh, please do yoga in this other room, but the main shrine room is a shrine room, so we should respect it to that. This is a room with old white people on the walls, and that's fine. And there is a Buddha here, but I don't think he minds. The only thing is that, of course, if you come in and there are some people meditating and the yoga is a bit noisy, so just courtesy with that would be good. But if it's empty or no one minds, yes, absolutely. Yeah. And I don't know, David would know if we're welcome to do yoga in the hall or just be flexible with that, or yeah, just take a yoga mat somewhere on the grassy patch and do it there. I think as long as the weather is okay, we can be very flexible with it. All right, thank you. Wishing you all lovely dreams, and let's reconvene at 9 a.m. British time to do some practice together. Thank you. Yes, and Venerable Tenzin has renamed himself on Zoom into Loving Kindness Yogi Tenzin, which I think is a very wonderful way of applying it immediately. Yeah. Good night to all.